But this is from Caitlin Clark herself. I'd hope to share a better update, but I will not be returning to play the season. I spent hours in the gym every day with the singular goal of getting back out there. Disappointed isn't a big enough word to describe how I'm feeling. I want to thank everyone who has had my back through all this uncertainty. This has been incredibly frustrating, but even in the bad, there is good. And the way the fans continue to show up for me and for the Fever brought me so much joy and important perspective. I'm so proud of how this team has only gotten stronger through adversity this year. Now it's time to close out the season and claim our spot in the playoff.
One sentence. That's all it took. One sentence from Caitlin Clark, and the entire foundation of the WNBA started shaking. It wasn't a game-winning shot. It wasn't a viral highlight. It wasn't even an injury update the league thought they could bury in a press release. It was a single, raw statement. A moment of honesty that broke through months of polished spin and empty promises. Disappointed isn't a big enough word. That's what she said. And those 5 words didn't just echo through her fan base, they detonated. To the outside world, it might have sounded like a star venting about a lost season. But to the people who had been watching closely, the fans who had seen the bruises, the cheap shocks, the silence from officials, and the endless string of vague updates, that sentence wasn't just frustration. It was confirmation. Confirmation that everything they feared was true. This wasn't just bad luck. This wasn't just another star going down with an injury. This was betrayal. And when fans feel betrayed, they don't just walk away quietly. They fight back. That's why what happened next wasn't a routine news cycle. It wasn't a blip. It was the spark of something much bigger. A rebellion, a wave of anger, suspicion, and revenge that is now unraveling the WNBA in real time. Because for months, fans felt ignored, misled, and used. They watched the league cash in on Caitlin Clark's talent while failing to protect her. They begged for answers, only to be fed empty lines designed to keep hope alive and wallets open. And when Clark finally spoke up herself, when she ripped away the last layer of denial, those same fans decided they'd had enough. They weren't going to wait for the league to fix things. They weren't going to accept excuses. Instead, they chose to make their own statement. A statement so powerful, so devastating, that it's now threatening the very survival of the WNBA. And here's the part nobody wants to admit. This collapse didn't come from the outside, from critics or rival leagues or lack of interest. It came from the inside, from the arrogance of executives who thought fans would never push back, from the greed that gambled with the health of the one player who single-handedly carried them into the spotlight. That gamble failed, and now the revenge is unfolding right in front of us. But how did one moment, one quote, one crack in the facade lead to an all-out collapse of an entire league? To understand that, we have to go back to the very beginning, to the first betrayal, the one fans still can't forgive. The moment itself almost looked ordinary. A press conference, a microphone, a tired face that had carried an entire league on her shoulders. But the words Caitlin Clark spoke that day weren't just an update about her condition. They were the match that set everything on fire. Disappointed isn't a big enough word. It was raw, it was sharp, and for anyone who had been paying attention, it was more than just a player venting. It was an admission that something deeper had been happening behind the scenes. Fans didn't hear an athlete talking about recovery. They heard the truth, finally cutting through the spin. For months, they had been fed a steady diet of vague medical reports, day-to-day status updates, and endless reassurances from the front office that everything was fine. But fans aren't blind. They saw the bruises piling up. They saw the pain Clark was playing through. They saw her rushed back onto the court when it was obvious she wasn't ready. And now, with one simple phrase, Clark confirmed what they had suspected all along. They hadn't just been misled, they had been lied to. That's why this wasn't just a statement. This was the trigger. Because when a star like Caitlin Clark, the single player responsible for record ticket sales, national TV spots, and the sudden surge of mainstream attention, finally admits she's been pushed past her limit, fans don't just shrug and move on. They feel every word as if it's aimed at them. And that's exactly what happened. Her sentence hit like a hammer. Fans didn't hear disappointment. They heard betrayal. They heard that the league, the coaches, and the executives had gambled with their hero's future just to squeeze out a few more weeks of ticket sales and TV ratings. And here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't end in silence. It explodes. Almost instantly, the conversation shifted. This wasn't about an injury anymore. This was about trust being broken. About a league that had been gifted a cultural phenomenon and mishandled it at every turn. Clark's statement became the rallying cry for fans who felt strung along and disrespected for months.
Social media lit up with accusations, speculation, and fury. Names started being called out. People wanted answers. And for the first time, the league wasn't in control of the narrative. The fans were. This was the moment where frustration transformed into action, where disappointment turned into revenge, where the entire fan base looked at each other and silently agreed if the league was going to play games with them, they were going to play one back. But here's the twist. The anger didn't start at that press conference. Clark's words were just the spark. The fire had been building long before, smoldering in plain sight. And to really understand how this all spiraled out of control, you have to go back to where it began, the very first betrayal that set fans on edge. Long before Caitlin Clark's announcement set off alarms, fans had already been uneasy. They didn't need press releases to tell them something was wrong. They could see it with their own eyes every single game. From the very start of her rookie season, Clark wasn't just targeted by defenders, she was hunted. Every drive to the basket seemed to come with an extra shove. Every screen felt like an excuse for a cheap shot. There were elbows to the ribs, hard fouls that went beyond playing tough, and moments where it looked less like defense and more like intimidation. And what did the league do? Nothing. That was the first betrayal. Because when you bring in a generational talent, the type of player who puts the WNBA on the map in ways it had never been before, your job is simple. Protect her. Make sure she can play the game that millions of new fans are tuning in to see. But instead, officials swallowed their whistles. The league shrugged off the hits. And game after game, fans had to watch as Clark was knocked to the floor without consequence. It didn't take long before the word targeting started trending. Clips of her being fouled spread across social media. Fans demanded answers, but none came. Instead of stepping in, league executives seemed to look the other way, as if acknowledging the problem would mean admitting they couldn't control it. And that silence spoke volumes. Because fans weren't just watching Clark play, they were investing in her. They were buying tickets, jerseys, and subscriptions, all because of one player who gave the league relevance it had never seen before. And in return, they expected the bare minimum, that the WNBA would take care of her. But that didn't happen. Instead, the league let her get battered while pretending everything was fine. And when fans begged for protection, they got brushed off with the same excuse. It's just the physicality of the game. But fans knew better. This wasn't normal. This was reckless. This was dangerous. And every uncalled foul, every ignored cheap shot, every time Clark had to pull herself up off the hardwood without help, it added up. Fans kept score. They could see the damage being done in real time, and the league's refusal to step in felt like a slap in the face. So when Clark finally broke down at that press conference, fans didn't see it as a shocking twist. They saw it as the inevitable result of months of neglect. They had been warning anyone who would listen. They had been shouting it from the stands. And now, the very thing they feared had come true. This was betrayal number one, the kind that cuts the deepest because it was preventable, and it left fans with a bitter question hanging in their minds. If the league couldn't even protect its brightest star on the court, what else were they willing to risk behind closed doors? The answer to that question would come soon enough, and it was even worse than anyone imagined. Because if the first betrayal came from officials ignoring Clark's safety, the second one came from much closer to home, the very organization she trusted to protect her future. If the league's silence on the court was the first betrayal, the second one cut even deeper because it came from inside Clark's own house. The Indiana Fever, the team that drafted her, the organization that promised to build around her, protect her, and turn her into the face of their future. Instead, what fans saw looked nothing like protection. It looked like exploitation. It started with whispers. Clark had been limping. She was holding her side after games. Fans noticed the pain, but the official updates? Always vague, always optimistic. She's day-to-day. We expect her back soon. Just a minor setback. Over and over, the same recycled lines. But behind those words, something else was happening. Clark wasn't healing. She was being rushed. Fans pieced it together quickly. They knew she had taken a brutal hit against the Liberty. That should have been the red flag moment, the time to shut her down, let her recover, and protect the investment that was literally keeping the WNBA alive. Instead, the Fever did the opposite. They dangled her return like bait, pushing her back onto the court weeks earlier than anyone expected. For what? Ticket sales, ratings, short-term revenue. That's when the fury exploded.
Because this wasn't about misjudging a timeline. This was about trust being broken by the very people who were supposed to safeguard her career. Fans called it out immediately. She's not ready. You're risking her health. But the front office pressed on, acting like everything was under control, smiling for cameras while their star was breaking down in plain sight. And when the season finally ended for Clark, the outrage was nuclear. Fans didn't mince words. They named names. Stephanie White, Amber Cox, Kelly Krauskopf. These weren't abstract villains. These were real people, decision makers. The ones fans believed had gambled with $1 billion talent. To the fan base, they weren't just executives anymore. They were liars. They were manipulators. And they had taken every ounce of goodwill Clark had generated and torched it for profit. The evidence was impossible to ignore. Ticket sales skyrocketed whenever Clark was scheduled to play. TV networks built entire broadcasts around her. Sponsors lined up at the door. And the Fever front office? They couldn't risk all that momentum collapsing, not even for her health. So they made their choice. They put business over loyalty, profit over protection. And that was the moment fans decided they couldn't trust a single word coming out of Indianapolis anymore. Every vague update, every forced smile at a press conference, every claim that Clark was almost ready, it all looked like a scam in hindsight. Fans felt strung along, milked for every last dollar while the truth was kept behind closed doors. That was betrayal number 2. Because betrayal from opponents stings. Betrayal from officials enrages. But betrayal from the very people you trust to guide your career? That's unforgivable. And once fans accepted that the Fever front office had failed her, everything else started to unravel. Because if the team and the WNBA only cared about money, fans figured out the only way to fight back against executives who only cared about revenue was to take that revenue away. And the results were immediate, brutal, and impossible to ignore. Ticket prices that had been sky high collapsed overnight. Games that once felt like can't-miss events suddenly looked like ghost towns. The value of an entire season evaporated in weeks. The fans knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't just walking away, they were delivering payback. If the league and the Fever had gambled Clark's health for profit, then the fans would flip the script. They would hit them where it hurt most. their wallets. And that's when the story shifted from betrayal to revenge. Because the financial collapse that followed wasn't an accident. It wasn't bad luck. It was orchestrated. A collective decision by a furious fan base to punish the very system that betrayed them. The question now wasn't whether the league had mishandled Caitlin Clark. That was already clear in the eyes of her supporters. The question was, how much damage could the fans do in return? The answer? More than anyone in the WNBA could have imagined.
If the front office thought fans would just swallow their frustration and keep showing up, they couldn't have been more wrong. Because once supporters realized the league and the Fever had chosen profit over protection, they decided to flip the script. If money was the motive, money would also be the punishment. And that's exactly what happened. The same fans who had been spending hundreds of dollars for a chance to see Caitlin Clark live suddenly slammed their wallets shut. Games that were once the hottest ticket in sports instantly turned cold. The collapse wasn't gradual, it wasn't subtle, it was immediate, and it was brutal. Take the Chicago Sky game, for example. When Clark was playing, tickets soared to nearly $400 just to sit in the building. After her injury announcement, you could walk in for $7. $7. Less than the price of a fast food combo meal. That's not a decline, that's annihilation. The Washington Mystics thought they were being clever when they moved their matchup against the Fever to a larger arena in Baltimore, banking on Clark's drawing power to fill thousands of extra seats. But when she was ruled out, demand cratered. Prices plummeted from $41 to $22. An entire section sat empty. What was supposed to be a showcase event turned into an embarrassing reminder of just how much the league depended on one player. And it didn't stop there. Across the WNBA, teams were left holding the bag for games nobody wanted to see anymore. Merch sales dried up. Secondary market prices collapsed. Broadcasts lost their energy as cameras panned across half-empty arenas. The league had gambled on Clark's star power to keep the money flowing. And now, without her, the entire system was collapsing under the weight of fan backlash. What made this different, what made it feel like true revenge, is that fans knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't staying home because they lost interest in basketball. They were staying home to send the message. You lied to us. You strung us along, and now we're taking back the one thing you care about most, our money. It was financial revenge executed with surgical precision. And every empty seat, every slashed ticket price, every unsold jersey was another blow against a league that thought its fans would never fight back. The message was clear. You can't treat your star like a disposable asset. You can't mislead the people who pay your bills and expect no consequences. The consequences were staring them right in the face, in the form of echoing arenas that used to be filled with chants, now replaced by silence. But the revenge didn't stop with fans, because while ticket sales collapsed, another blow was coming from an even higher place, the national sports media. And when the people who shaped the conversation turned their backs, the league's problems went from financial to existential. If the empty arenas and collapsing ticket prices were the first signs of a crisis, the silence from the media was the death blow. For months, the WNBA had basked in a spotlight it had never experienced before. National headlines, primetime coverage, viral clips flooding social feeds, all of it thanks to one name, Caitlin Clark. She wasn't just covered, she was everywhere. Talk shows opened with her highlights. Sports radio hosts built entire segments around her. Networks shifted their schedules just to ride her momentum. But the moment she was gone, the spotlight didn't dim, it vanished. And that silence was louder than any boo from the stands. Take Jason Whitlock, for example. He didn't just criticize the league, he declared flat out that he was done, finished. To him, the WNBA wasn't worth a second of airtime without Clark on the floor. Then came Colin Cowherd, one of the biggest sports voices in the country. On his nationally syndicated show, he admitted that last season, he led his program with Caitlin Clark 6 separate times. That's unheard of. In sports radio, leading a show with the same player even twice in 1 year is rare, but Clark was that powerful. And this season, Cowherd didn't talk about the WNBA once, not once. His explanation was brutally simple. Clark wasn't playing, and without her, there was no story. That's the part that should terrify the league, because sports media isn't just about reporting games. It's about shaping the national conversation, And when the tastemakers decide you're irrelevant, you become irrelevant.
Fans can feel betrayed and walk away. That's bad. Ticket prices can collapse. That's worse. But when the media turns its back, that's the kill shot. Because if no one with a platform is talking about your league, you stop existing in the broader sports world altogether. It's not just about Clark's absence. It's about what her absence revealed, that the WNBA hadn't actually built a foundation. They had been gifted a phenomenon and assumed it would last forever. But when the media realized the league couldn't protect its only superstar, they stopped wasting their time. They moved on. And make no mistake, this wasn't passive neglect. It was active abandonment. Commentators weren't politely ignoring the WNBA. They were openly saying it wasn't worth talking about anymore. Fans didn't have to connect the dots. The media connected them out loud. That's when the collapse stopped being a story about basketball and became a story about survival. Because if fans aren't buying tickets and the media isn't covering your games, then what's left? The WNBA had spent years fighting for recognition, clawing for scraps of attention. Caitlin Clark gave them a feast. Ratings, revenue, relevance, and in the blink of an eye, it was gone. Not because of bad luck, but because of arrogance and greed. And now, with the media turning away, the WNBA wasn't just struggling, it was invisible. But this wasn't the end of the collapse. It was only the setup for something even bigger. Because once you strip away the hype and the headlines, you're left with a brutal reality. The entire league had been built on the back of one player. And now, with her sidelined, the cracks were no longer hidden. They were gaping holes. For decades, the WNBA fought for recognition. Small gains here and there, a loyal niche fan base, but never the kind of mainstream pull that could rival other professional leagues. And then, almost overnight, everything changed. That change had a name: Caitlin Clark. Her arrival wasn't just a boost, it was a revolution. She wasn't another star in the making. She was a cultural event. The kind of player who pulled casual fans into arenas, who made highlight reels go viral, who had NBA legends and mainstream celebrities tweeting about women's basketball in ways that had never happened before. Before Clark, WNBA games often struggled to break through the noise of the sports world. After Clark, entire arenas sold out. National broadcasts outdrew expectations. Merch sales spiked. Social media engagement exploded. The league wasn't trending upward, it was skyrocketing, fueled almost entirely by one player's magnetism. And that's the uncomfortable truth the WNBA never wanted to admit. This wasn't a league-wide renaissance. It wasn't years of careful planning finally paying off. It was a gift, handed to them by one athlete who became the face of women's basketball at the level the league had never seen before. Instead of nurturing that gift, protecting it, and building a long-term foundation around it, they treated it like an endless well they could draw from. The problem? That well wasn't bottomless. The moment Clark went down, the momentum went with her. Fans didn't just lose interest, they abandoned ship. Media coverage didn't just dip, it vanished. All the games, all the hype, all the attention the WNBA had been bragging about were revealed for what they really were: a house of cards stacked on Clark's shoulders. And when those shoulders gave out, the house collapsed. That's why the betrayal hit fans so hard. They weren't just angry that Clark got hurt. Injuries happen in sports. They were furious because they knew the league had been gifted something priceless and squandered it out of greed. Instead of taking the long view and building sustainable growth, they chased short-term dollars and left their star exposed. The result? The same fans who had carried the WNBA into relevance decided to take that relevance back. And the same media outlets that had once treated Clark like must-see television decided the league wasn't worth a mention without her. The bigger picture is simple but devastating. The WNBA didn't build Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark built the WNBA. And when you realize that, the fallout becomes even clearer. Because if the league's entire survival depends on one player, what happens when that player no longer trusts the system she's supposed to lead? That's the question now haunting the WNBA.
Not just how they recover ticket sales or how they win fans back, but whether Caitlin Clark herself will even want to continue carrying a league that failed her so completely. And if she walks away, then the collapse we've seen so far won't be the end. It will be the beginning of something even darker. Up to this point, the collapse of the WNBA has felt like a complete story. The betrayals happened, the fans retaliated, the media walked away, the league crumbled. End of chapter, right? Not even close. Because the truth is, this isn't the end of the story. It's only the beginning. Right now, fans are still asking the same haunting questions. What happens next? What happens when Caitlin Clark is finally healthy? And perhaps the scariest question of all, will she even want to come back? Reports already suggest that trust inside the Indiana Fever organization is fractured, maybe beyond repair. Fans have openly called the front office liars. They've named names, accused executives of gambling with Clark's career, and vowed not to forgive. So if you're Clark, why would you ever return to the same system that many believe betrayed you? And the uncertainty doesn't stop there. Rumors are swirling about something even bigger, a potential lockout. If negotiations with the players' union collapse, there might not even be a 2026 season for Clark to return to. Imagine that, the league betting everything on one star, only to risk canceling an entire season at the very moment she's ready to come back. The timing couldn't be worse or more damning. Then there are the secrets, because fans are convinced we haven't heard the full story yet. They believe there are decisions, conversations, and medical truths hidden behind closed doors that would expose just how reckless this season really was. And the longer the silence lasts, the louder the speculation grows. That's why the story feels unfinished, because every piece of fallout we've seen so far might only be the first wave. The real shock waves are still coming. What if Clark decides she won't play another minute until the front office changes? What if sponsors, embarrassed by the league's mismanagement, start pulling their money? What if those rumored secrets finally leak, showing the full extent of what went on behind the scenes? Every one of those what-ifs has the power to destroy what little is left of the league's credibility. And here's the irony. The WNBA has spent years begging for relevance, fighting for visibility, demanding a bigger stage. Caitlin Clark handed it to them on a silver platter. And in less than one season, their mishandling of her may have set the league back further than it's ever been. That's the unfinished story. A league dangling on the edge, a superstar who may not want to save it, and a fan base that has already proven it won't be fooled again. The collapse of 2025 might just be the prelude. The real ending? That hasn't been written yet. Caitlin Clark's final words weren't just about her season, they were about the state of the entire WNBA. Disappointed isn't a big enough word. That one phrase became more than a personal statement. It became a verdict, a judgment, a flashing red siren that forced everyone to confront what they had been trying to ignore. Because what we've seen over the past months isn't just an injury story. It's a cautionary tale. A league that was handed a once-in-a-lifetime superstar, and instead of protecting her, it gambled with her health. A front office that had the chance to build trust and instead chose deception. A sport that finally had the world's attention, only to drive that attention away through arrogance and greed. And now, the consequences are undeniable. Empty seats, crashed ticket prices, silent arenas. Media outlets that once couldn't stop talking about the WNBA now refusing to mention it at all. Fans who feel so betrayed they've weaponized their wallets against the very league they once supported. This isn't bad luck. This isn't a minor setback. This is collapse. Collapse triggered not by injury, but by betrayal. And the most painful irony of all, The WNBA did this to itself. For years, Commissioner Engelbert confidently told anyone who would listen that the league could survive if one star went down. But the numbers don't lie. The attention don't lie. The reality don't lie. The WNBA wasn't built to withstand the loss of Caitlin Clark because it wasn't built around a system. It was built around her. And when she finally broke under the weight of everything piled onto her shoulders, the league broke too. But here's the haunting part. This story isn't finished. The fans have already made their move. The media has already turned away. The league is standing on shaky ground. And Caitlin Clark? She holds the final card. Will she return to a system so many believe betrayed her? Or will she decide that her future is bigger than a league that treated her like a product instead of a person?
That's the question the WNBA doesn't want you to ask. That's the nightmare they can't ignore. Because if Clark decides she's done, then the collapse we've seen so far won't be the end of the WNBA. It will be the obituary. For now, one thing is clear. The fans got their revenge. The media got theirs too. And as the dust settles, the WNBA is left staring at a reality more brutal than any opponent on the court. The realization that it may not survive the fallout of its own mistakes. The collapse isn't coming. It's already here. But the secrets still buried in that front office, the conversations that haven't leaked, the truths that fans are still waiting to uncover, those could be even worse. And when they come out, I'll be here to reveal them.